Now, I don't think Tucker Carlson has any love for armed resistance, or would even call it like that. I certainly don't think he's got any love for the Palestinians either. But he is a pragmatist and a realist who's saying this isn't working. And our ticket, our platform, was in withdrawing from wars that don't work.
Tucker Carlson, traditionally has been very far right in the US. But what's interesting in the US, and we'll get to Piers later on, we'll first speak to Tucker Carlson, is there's a few podcasters on the right. No less than Bannon, who is not at all like how Tucker Carlson is in terms of his articulation of the problems with Israel and the US arming Israel. But even he is dead against the US continuing its support against Israel. We've also seen Candace Owens. There's two interviews that we're just going to play very brief clips of and then comment on this. This is his interview with Ted Cruz. We'll just play it for a while.
Why is Israel? I don't think
I'm obsessed with Israel.
Okay, but I think a lot of people are, and like the question, Israel spies on us. Well, so does every other country. Why are you mad at Israel?
I guess. No. I'm hardly the one who's. I've never taken money from the Israel lobby. Have you?
Taken money from the Israel
from AIPAC?
So AIPAC raises a lot of money for me, but it's actually a misnomer because the people who raise money are individuals. Right. So it's not the PAC itself, but they're individual members who believe in the American-Israeli friendship and relationship.
Is AIPAC a foreign lobby?
No, it's an American lobby. It's the AIPAC stands for the America-Israeli Political Action Committee.
What does it lobby for?
So, to be honest, not a whole lot effectively. Listen, I came into Congress 13 years ago with the stated intention of being the leading defender of Israel in the United States Senate.
Great.
And I've worked every day to do that. AIPAC, a lot of times.
Okay, we don't have time to see the whole interview, but I mean, this is one of many interviews that Tucker Carlson has had recently. In the specific interview, he also pushes Ted Cruz on the West Bank, on the ideas of Judea-Samaria, on his evangelical Christian roots and why he prioritizes those ideas instead of U.S. interests and policy. I'm sure you've seen it. What do you make of that split in the U.S. with elements of the right or even the far right becoming extremely skeptical of the U.S.'s consistent support, especially from a military point of view of Israel? And how do you see it playing out?
It's unexpected. It's extremely significant. What you're seeing is a very skillful interviewer taking Ted Cruz apart in a really informed way. Now, interestingly, if you contrast what Tucker Carlson said after the Hamas attack and what he's saying now, the move has been, the movement has been extraordinary. And I think what that is saying is that they are, what's coming out is a huge skepticism about the claims that Israel has made as to why it is doing what it's doing. The expression of, you could call it American isolationism, but the expression of, why are we doing this? Where is the American interest in supporting Israel doing this? The American interest is in pushing Israel to make peace with its neighbors. The American interest is the Abraham Accords. The American interest is in deconfliction, not reconfliction. And I think they're expressing all of that very powerfully. And it is at least one half of Trump's base that it is, why are we doing these foreign wars? Nothing seems to be working. It's you can call it isolationism or you can call it realism, that everything, as I said, since Kosovo has basically gone wrong, and Gaza's going wrong from America's point of view, because Hamas should have been crushed a long time ago. Now, had Hamas been crushed a long time ago, and had they waved a white flag, had they done what Yasser Arafat did in Beirut in 1982 and just simply said, fine, we're being bombarded, we'll leave for Tunisia. And they raised the white flag. Then you had the picture of the Hamas leadership actually getting on a boat or getting on a plane and saying goodbye. Israel would have stopped this. Yet that's what they wanted. They wanted total victory. They
You
wanted
think
a sign of total victory.
Do you think they would have stopped?
I think so. I think they would. Stopped. They would have. They
would have halted.
They would have halted, right? But they didn't get that. It's because Hamas hasn't surrendered that this is going. Now, this is a very, very. I didn't expect this to happen, but it is happening. It's not just the progressive left in America that is totally turned against Israel. It's also one half of the Republican Party, and it's a very important part of it, because that represents the party, or the part of the party that said, after all these wars, I want to stop wars. Now, Trump isn't stopping the wars, and is carrying on, basically being led by the nose, right? So we talked about this before. How credible is Steve Witkoff, his envoy, as a Middle East envoy, or indeed as an envoy, if he's ignored by Israel or he's ignored by Putin? How effective is this? This has an effect on foreign policy. Now, I don't think Tucker Carlson has any love for armed resistance, or would even call it like that. I certainly don't think he's got any love for the Palestinians either. But he is a pragmatist and a realist who's saying this isn't working, and our ticket, our platform, was in withdrawing from wars that don't work. It was the other side. It was the Democrats who, and Tucker Carlson's been extremely vocal, and rightly so. I agree with him, actually, on the myth of liberal interventionism that's caused one war after another in the Middle East, all due to the assumption that you can destroy a country completely and then remake it in your image. That failed in Afghanistan, it failed in Iraq, it failed in Libya, it failed in Syria. It's failed wherever it's been applied. Now, most of it was done under people who would call themselves progressive on the political spectrum. That's what Tucker Carlson was aiming at, and now he's turned his guns on his own party because they're falling into the same trap as Biden. They're letting Israel get away with it.
I mean, we're not going to listen to this for too long because we're running out of time, but another very interesting was this one he had with who was actually a Christian nun, Mother Agapia, who lives in Palestine. She's American. We'll just play this a little bit. And I mean, honestly, when I saw this, I felt in many ways it may be the most consequential interview that's been around in the English world since October 7th because of its potential to kind of enlighten.
Have you, a lot of Christians in the Holy Land. How many support the government of Israel? Do you know?
The Palestinians within Israel?
Yeah, Christians support the government of Israel.
I don't know that they would be any that really would. What's the especially now? I mean, they're literally throwing out Palestinian representatives.
So in the U.S., there's a sense that Christians support this program.
Of course not. And to the when I first moved there in '98, there was hope for peace, and there was a much stronger.
Okay, we're not going to listen to more there, but I mean, it's interesting because this is something we hear about all the time and we cover. But Tucker is now getting this very credible message to a very interesting part of the American society, and I think it bodes well for a future situation.
It's not just about Muslims.
Yes, absolutely, and I mean also it's speaking to the Christians who for their own reasons, many of them are probably becoming Christian Zionists who maybe because of Israel's atrocities are becoming. I mean, just to kind of back your claim that Tucker doesn't probably care much about Palestinians is recently what he said about Greta Thunberg, who's currently aboard a flotilla. So we'll just play this before we move on.
Messed up the details. I probably have. Greta Thunberg. You weren't even that mean. You're like, she's clearly mentally ill, something like that.
I said the left is exploiting this mentally ill Swedish child.
It's so obviously true. So if you said that now,
right. So I mean, you're absolutely right. This is clearly. I mean, and this was 2 weeks ago. So this is not something from an archive. So you're absolutely right about this.
Tucker Carlson hasn't become a comrade, right?
No, absolutely. I mean,
but the phenomenon is really interesting because the phenomenon speaks to is this good for America? And the answer is no, it's not.
Okay, so I mean, Piers Morgan's a bit more interesting. Before I actually play, I just have two clips to play of him. Yes, absolutely.
Can I just make one point? I think it's tremendously important what's going on in America, possibly more important than any public shift anywhere else in the world, for two reasons. The last 2 years in Gaza has huge resonances with what happened in the Vietnam War, it was very, very clear to the CIA 7 years before the end of the Vietnam War that they couldn't win. But many of the same things were applied. They wanted to de-radicalize, de-Viet Congize the villages. They wanted to create model villages. They wanted to separate out the guerrilla fighters, and they couldn't do any of that. And they lost a lot. It took 7 years for them to get out, and another president, two presidents, it was Kennedy, LBJ, and Nixon finally. And the two things that defeated American firepower, which was enormous, was the resilience of the Vietnamese people themselves, the peasants, and American public opinion. And the two things that are going to defeat all of these plans that we've been talking about are Palestinian resistance in all its forms, particularly non-violent resistance, saying, no, I'm not going to leave. No, I'm not going to. Sumud. And American public opinion. And what we're seeing now is a disintegration of that automatic claim that Israel shares our values. It should be an American state. All of that, all of the stuff that we've lived with is melting down as a result of this. And they're questioning the instinctive Zionism of the progressive left, and they're questioning now the instinctive Zionism of the Republican Party. So what we're seeing with Tucker Carlson, we may laugh about it and say, oh, ha, 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 look at him, is tremendously important.
Yeah, it is. Just one thing, just to retort on the 7 years to see, the Vietnam War come to an end. The Israelis, I think, know that, and so the horrific nature is that they are continuously escalating and speeding up the operation in Gaza. And so we're seeing with Gaza City, there's these things, you've probably seen them. Now they have robotic armored cars that drive around and have 7 tons of explosives and go off 10. It's been reported by the EU monitoring rights group on this, that about 10 to 11 of these guards go off every night recently. And they take out about 30 or 40 housing units with each explosion. So there's this sumud and there's this awful reality that Israel is creating facts on the ground, as they've done before Oslo, as they've done honestly since '67, and it really puts the Palestinian situation in a very sad point, and we'll discuss that when we get to the end of the interview.
Sad is an underestimate. It's existential.
No, it
really is existential.
It really is existential. I think this is really existential. That term's used a lot, but this literally is existential. And it's very sad because, again, I think we need new language because it's happening so live and with so much people seeing it and so much people knowing they're powerless while it's still occurring, and so many people who have power just involved in some game of denialism and trickery, and it's an entirely new concept. I think it's always been there, like you mentioned, but I think given the kind of connectivity we live in today's world,
this is what I mean when I use the word evil.
Yeah, it's I wasn't
exactly that.
Yes, it's exactly evil. Another interesting person's been Piers Morgan. Now, just before I actually go into his clips, I think to his credit, he's platformed many Palestinian voices. He's platformed many people who are very, articulate in their criticisms of Israel. Bassem Youssef. He's platformed doctors who've gotten back. Whistleblowers like Anthony Aguilar, who was part of the GHF sort of effort before he decided to leave his position out of disgust. And that's been very, very important. Again, after October 7th, he, repeated a lot of the Israeli lies about beheaded babies, about people in ovens, all sorts of things. We're not going to play a lot of his clips, but I think there's one clip which is 3 months old, which is relatively new. And it's when he started being a lot more by his own admission, a lot more forceful against Israeli guests. So we're gonna see some of that pushback first, right, and then play one other clip. So this is his pushback against Israeli guests.
Well,
it's none of your business whether the journalists view their safety as being a risk.
I'm sorry, you haven't heard the reasons yet. The first, of course, is the safety of the journalists, and I appreciate you don't accept that. The second...
I think it's a load of nonsense.
The second is the safety...
The idea you're doing is some quaint concern for the safety of journalists is bullshit.
That was reason number one. Reason number two is the ability of IDF soldiers to be able to conduct this war against Hamas without
without the journalists getting in the way.
No, without.
They've actually, by the way, they've killed more journalists in Palestinian journalists.
So I mean, we can see that. I mean, he's not just he's doing exactly what he'd normally do to guests who are pro-Palestinian. He's butting in. He's not allowing them to finish their sentences. He's being condescending, and he started to do that a lot, right? But this clip is the one from 3 months ago, and he's often had Mehdi Hassan on the show, and again, it's you're going to see a monologue from him where he's very critical of Israel, but there's a few nuggets in there which I think are very revealing.
Israel's ongoing offensive in Gaza. President Trump now says it's time for Netanyahu to wrap it up. Israel is allowing some aid to trickle into Gaza after an 11-week blockade, but aid workers say it's a drop in the ocean, and the US president has acknowledged that a lot of people in Gaza are starving. Shamefully, Hamas still holds 58 hostages and is watching the total destruction of Gaza and its people because it doesn't want peace and it doesn't value human life. It's increasingly difficult to argue that the exact same statement doesn't apply to Netanyahu's Israeli government. Israel's war on Hamas was not a genocide, but genocide isn't something that happens with the push of a button. A justified war can end with atrocities that stain humanity, as many have through history. So who is going to stop this one before it does, if it hasn't already? Well, joining me now is Mehdi Hassan, the editor-in-chief and CEO of Zatea, and retired Major John Spencer, chair of urban warfare studies at the Modern War Institute. Okay, let's get into this. Mehdi, welcome back to Uncensored. Listen, you and I have talked about this war in Gaza for ever since it started, this phase of the 75-year conflict. And I have resisted going as far as you have done in your criticism of the Israeli government. I resist no more.
Yeah, so that's the important part, right? Now, what do you make of what he said there?
He's coming from a different place from Tucker Carlson, completely different place. He is coming from the position of liberal Zionism, which basically says a plague on all your houses. There are extremists in Israel, and there are extremists on the Palestinian side. He repeated again that Hamas doesn't care a jot for human life. I don't agree with that assessment at all. I think of Hamas as a product of a resistance movement, and whether you have Hamas there or not, there is still always going to be a strong element of the Palestinian body politic that will resist through armed force, principally and simply because they can't get any movement politically.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you.
So he's in a very, very different place. Yep. Now he's moved a
whole deal
across a wide terrain as a result of Israel's campaign. I think there's an element of Piers Morgan that is clickbait, a very strong element of that, considering where he was. And I think he's realized that he can get a much bigger audience if he shifts position. He's again a very, very skillful broadcaster and journalist. So he's applying his very skillful techniques now. He's the typical example of a circular firing squad.
Yeah.
But the fact that he's moved, I think, is interesting because I think there's a lot of disquiet amongst traditional supporters of Israel about what supporting Israel actually means. Does it mean, if you say you're a friend of Israel, which he would say he is or was, that you're a friend of apartheid? Does it mean now that you're a friend of genocide? Does it mean that you are a friend of robots being sent in and demolishing, because that's what Israel is doing. Does it mean you're a friend of Ben Gvir, because he's possibly the next prime minister? I.e., being a supporter of Israel, which, to get anywhere in politics now, you have to support Israel. It's most of the Conservative Party, what's left of it. It's all of Reform. And it's the entire leadership of the Labour Party, right? Everyone has to say, in order to get moving up the greasy pole of British politics or American politics, that they're friends of Israel. What actually does that mean? To what extent can you support the idea of, you could say, all right, the liberals would say, we're supporting Israel for all its citizens. But an Israel for all its citizens has disappeared. It has literally been extinguished. And it's a myth that Israel is a nice, friendly state, that is a democracy, and that cares for its people. And if only it had the right leadership, and if only there were pragmatists on the other side, you'd have two states, however small the Palestinian state was. It's a myth. And that is why, and that is what now the war is challenging. The war is challenging the relationship of all supporters of Israel to Israel itself. And the answers that are coming up in their head are extremely painful, including the answers that are coming up in Piers Morgan's head.